Most of our listeners say we are the trendiest podcast in the corporate learning podcast space. But today we're really diving into it. McKinsey has a new report out on learning trends, and we're going to talk to two of the authors, Jessica Glazer and Jake Gittleson, on this episode of the Learning Geeks podcast, starting now.
Jack is actually my alter ego that I use to sign up for everything.
Is it really?
Yeah. I shouldn't be saying this because this is probably defeating
now
the
everybody knows.
I'm not going to say my last name, what my last name is, but Jack is my first name. Yeah.
Okay, so if you haven't figured out already, dear listener, it wasn't Jake Gittleson is just a pseudonym for Jake Gittleson, our co-host, who also is one of the authors of this report. So at least, I've got it here right now. And, on the slide, I can look at this slide and I can say right now, you two did 99% of the work. Because, all right, so you've got your boss in the upper left is the main author. We know Lisa read it, signed off on it. Yeah, good job, guys. You two there, project owners, seriously. You did all of the work. And then to the right, you've got all of the people, we've met some of them. We used to work with John San Gimino, right? So, those guys might have done, given you an idea or two, but you guys
forwarded
did
an
all
article.
The work, I'm sure.
Maybe they forwarded an article or two.
Yeah. Or click the button on ChatGPT.
Lisa right now, if she's listening. If you're listening, Lisa, she's probably shutting this off already.
Jake really likes his job, Lisa.
And Lisa, we're overdue for lunch.
I'm sure it's the first on her list.
Okay, so let's go about this the right way. First off, let's welcome Jessica. Jake, do you want to give the formally informal introduction of Jessica?
Yeah, I have the formal informal introduction. So let's go. So anyway, so we're glad Jessica's here. So Jessica has over 20 years of research, writing and teaching experience in leadership development, positive psychology. She's helped individuals and organizations reach their potential. She's currently an expert in learning design at McKinsey. She's served as senior faculty member, executive coach at the Global Design Lead at the Center for Creative Leadership. She's taught psychology and business at Johns Hopkins. She's worked in career development at Wharton. She's been head of teaching fellow at Harvard, where she's also won teaching awards for every single course she taught. She's an executive coach and researcher, and her writing has appeared in Forbes, Chief Executive Magazine, Women's Health, and then she has a graduate degree in mental health counseling from Johns Hopkins, and she is now living in Dublin, Ireland for, I think, a year and a half, correct?
Almost.
Or is it past a year?
Like past a year, yeah.
Past a year.
So
coming from Carolina over to Dublin.
With that background, Jessica, why did you stoop so low as to come onto our podcast?
Well, what was funny was, so again, dear listener, we spent like 7.5 minutes in the green room just laughing and talking about movies and all this kind of stuff. And as soon as Jake went down Jessica's amazing resume, I saw your face transform into now I am this serious professional.
I think it was like,
whereas,
it's always uncomfortable to sit there and
it is. It's so
camera.
People talking about
it's
you.
also a strange thing. Usually, if someone's introducing you, you're sort of like off to the side, so you can just sit. Like,
and then you come out to applause.
I was waiting for my applause.
Mm-hmm.
You witnessed my discomfort, but no, it's all factually correct. And I do live in Dublin.
What brought you to Dublin? Dublin's a great
city.
It is.
We really love it. I'm from New York originally. We were living most recently in North Carolina, and then my husband's role required him to move to Dublin, and then our company was amazing about it, and they were super supportive.
Now, our good friend Elliot Mazie is in
I didn't know
Dublin
that.
as well. Yeah, he's there for an extended period of time. Yeah, he you might want to reach out to him and say, hey, let's do lunch.
You should.
At a pub.
I'm sure he'd be glad to connect with you guys. Yeah.
Did he bring his horse out there?
Did he bring his what?
His horse out there? What's his horse's name?
No, but he's there for an extended period of time, and he came back to the States for a little bit, and he's not living there, but he's living there. I don't know what the laws are as far as how long you can stay before you You have
booted
to
out.
declare citizenship.
Exactly.
So what about trends?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Let's dive into it. Do you want to give us like the summary really quick?
Yeah, let's do the background. So we talked about the trends work last year. So just as a reminder, what do we do with this work? We have a team of researchers. I think our team this year was anywhere from 13 to 15 people total. We go off and we review 45 plus global trend reports that come out at the end of the year as well as the beginning of the year. They're cross industry. So we look at things like learning, psychology, HR, tech, finance, geopolitics. We did some travel pieces and then general design, marketing as well. And these are these reports that you have. What are the trends for 2025 or whatever the case could be? And we want to go off and look at them. So we have a team of researchers that go off. These individuals are senior leaders. We have individuals that are in either some L&D capacity. This year we had someone that was in our talent attraction team. We also some people who do our people and organization practice. In the past, we've tried to get people who have a cross-functional view outside of L&D to provide a really strong perspective in it. So we go off, we do some research. Everybody gets 2 to 3 reports or so. We start to identify what are some key themes of and implications for us within the development side of an organization. And then we cluster those themes. We do a lot of debate. It's a pretty lengthy process. Even the process of us all coming together, it takes hours for us to kind of like bring everything together. We'll sit on a call and use a Miro board, bring all those commonalities together. We try to avoid, this is kind of interesting, we actually try to avoid using AI during this process because we do it for the benefit of all of us who are working on it, because we want everybody to truly synthesize what they have learned and what they're reading, rather than just having AI go do it all. Again, we could do that, but again, we're intentionally making that decision to have everybody process it and understand it. So we do that, and then from there, myself, Jessica, and Lisa, and a few others, we'll go more into depth we'll do writing, we'll do more detailed research. I think overall we had over 100 plus citations in this report. So we do a deeper dive to uncover what we think is our perspective based off of all this reading that we have done. In the past, we've really just listed here's 9 trends that we've identified and what are they meaningful for us. This year, we have said here are 3 general macro trends that we believe that any organization needs to be doing to be future forward in this kind of era of development and to reimagine what development is. And then we've identified subtopics underneath that we believe that every organization should be doing in those bigger, larger macro trends. So we did more of a perspective this year rather than just a simple, here's an analysis of what we found. And we really enjoy the process. It's, again, lengthy. We start at the end of January. We go until the end of April throughout the whole thing. We're not doing it full time, but it is a pretty lengthy process. And I mean, Jessica, you've done it. This is your first year doing it. Hopefully you liked it, or who knows? I don't know. What did you think of it?
I'm here to tell you my true thoughts. No, I loved it. I really loved it. I thought it was a really rigorous and fascinating process. And so, as Jake said, looking at trends from finance and politics and comparing those with trends from the travel industry and art, areas within the arts is really interesting to kind of look for what the commonalities are and how that relates to the work that we're doing.
Well, hopefully this is reassuring for you guys in this. I read it, I read it yesterday when I got my hands on it, and I found myself nodding along to all of it. Like, yeah, this feels right. This is, this is kind of what I expected to see here. So it does feel good that we're all kind of on the same page and seeing things the same way. I'm a little curious as to if you're willing to share or if there's any good stories about it. What are the things that you were debating about? Are there, anything that got left on the cutting room floor or, anything like that?
I don't know. Do you want to take that one?
Well, I don't know that. I think we tried to incorporate most things. I think what
one thing that struck us was that there was, for the most part, I think, overwhelming agreement in the direction that we were heading, both in terms of making it more of a perspective, and then also in the groupings that we came to. And as Jake said, it was a lengthy and rigorous process. And I think there were a few trends, though, that might be worth calling out that I think undergirded the work that we were doing. One being and I know you've had guests on talking about, the exhaustion that people feel from change. But, when we're talking about the constant disruption, that was something that just kept coming through in every area. And there were also, at the same time, these dichotomies that were appearing to everyone from the different reports that they were assigned or had selected. And so there was, how are we balancing these things? One coming to mind was a travel report and a trends in travel. And on one hand, they were saying that Airbnb had seen a year-over-year increase of 100% higher searches for off-the-grid accommodation. People who like shifting from being digital nomads to wanting Airbnbs that had literal boxes that they could lock their phone in. Yeah. And this is now a highlight of some Airbnb locations. And then on the other hand, they were saying, oh, well, some of our trends really revolve around people doing influencer travel. So going to little known places specifically because of influencers, because they're on their phone so much. So it was this balance. And then when we looked at that, there was the other trend that we were seeing were sort of these blurred boundaries. So that kind of went through everything. And because of those two things, the blurred boundaries, balancing these different areas, and then also the constant disruption, we figured having a perspective would help us to sort of help people to navigate through that rather than just get more information overload.
So the biggest theme overall, Jessica and I kept using this term, it's the constant swirl around us. And so that was the general landscape. And we can all feel it. We all feel it, the constant change. But it felt like a constant swirl, which then led into a lot of these other sub factors and trends that we're noticing. But maybe before we kind of dive in deep, should we at least highlight what those macros are? And then we can kind of jump in. And also for those that are listening, the last time we did this last year, we did not have the report to publish. So this is the first year where we're able to publish it publicly. This is our fourth year doing it. Other times we've shared it with our clients and so forth, but this is the first time we've shared it publicly. So for those that want to dive deep, we have it that you can check out, and I'll have that in the show notes below.
Which is super cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, Jack, if you want to be a real high maintenance guest
Sure.
and just take control of the podcast,
I can.
Please go ahead.
That's just what I do as Jack Gittleson.
Gittleson.
I think it's Gittleson. Yeah,
Sorry.
Gittleson. The Jack I know is Jack Gittleson.
So the three macro trends that we had, one is a fluid development ecosystem, or fluid development ecosystems. And again, we believe that all leaders and organizations should be moving in these three directions. They're not just trends, but three things that we believe should be something that we should all be moving towards. So number 2 is responsible AI adoption. And then 3 is resilient and adaptable individuals and organizations. So of those 3, are there 3, Dana, Bob, as you looked at, do we want to maybe dive deep in first and then we can kind of go to the next ones if you want?
Well, one question I had, Jake, was when I looked at the first one, the fluid development ecosystems, there were parts of it that seemed like may have been influenced by the 5 moments of need and the whole idea of integrating work into or learning into the workplace. And I know your team has done a lot of work in that space. I'm just wondering, do you see this part of this as an evolution of the 5 moments of need, or a small part of the bigger fluid development ecosystem?
I mean, that's a good one to start with, because there's a reason why we had that one first, because we feel like it's an anchor to the rest. So to answer your question, Dana, is it a evolution? I would say yes, but also a little larger. So like if we think of the 5 moments of need, that work in most of the time still sits within L&D. So I go through that process, and we think of what are that types of performance support that we want to integrate. And it still sits within the L&D team. But when we step back and we really say, what does fluid development ecosystems mean? That means that, one, you think of the end-to-end experience from the moment that you are hired or even recruited to the moment that you leave an organization. What are some development that occurs throughout that? How do I support and service development from that first moment to the end? And again, that opens up the door for us to be able to do more, not just siloed focus within our L&D walls, either formal learning pieces or, again, traditional performance support. I know that if someone that's really, really into performance support will say that's not what we do, but the reality is a lot of people it still sits within L&D. That's one of the biggest things. And so I'll list off for listeners the first three three sub trends that we had underneath it. So first, in order to do this fluid development ecosystem, we say you need to have a de-siloed people functions, HR functions, whatever you call it. We call it people functions. But so again, think of those that work within your recruiting team, your L&D team, maybe you have people analytics. I'll think of all these different functions that sit. So we have to figure out more and more ways for us to integrate and work together to be able to solve these development challenges that do occur from that moment that you're recruited to the moment that you leave.
So Jake, maybe before we move on to the next one, how does that look structurally within an organization?
That's a fantastic question, Dana, because the thing that's going to be really challenging is to completely remove those silos and boundaries.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be the number one. How do you get people together to solve certain high priority people development challenges? Get them in together into working teams. So I think in the future, you're going to see more and more teams organized based off of either the challenge and then also the expertise that you have. So you may sit still within a function or at least a group based off of your expertise, but you're coming together to solve problems based off of what the organization wants you to solve or what you're starting to identify.
So you have cross-functional teams within the people function.
Or within the people function, exactly.
Yeah, maybe.
So,
or maybe you just break it all down together. I don't know, but I love this one. I feel like we need something here, and part of the reason I love it is I feel like it's coming more from the point of view of the learner, right?
Exactly.
This is something I think we lose all the time, and to the learner, it's just like, I don't care what part of HR. It's just HR. Like, oh my gosh, HR.
They don't see the boundaries. Exactly.
Right.
They don't care about the boundaries at all.
And so when they hear, messages that sound very different, talking about things that in their mind are the same thing or very similar, it just gets very, very confusing.
Exactly.
Well, I want to, Bob, you mentioned the learner, but what I was thinking of is this part of the shift is really, again, to the performer rather than the learner, right? The learner implies someone who's, in some cases, stepping out of the environment and, learning something and then going back into the environment. Whereas typically performers they're the ones doing the stuff.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of a good Yoda quote to come back and say, in my mind, those were the same things. But I like your clarification, Dana.
I think so. Personally, when I
gotta go. We'll see.
when I frame it, I've actually removed learner out of my vocabulary as much as I can to treat it just as like how do we support the development of our employees, and just simple as that. Again, it's super simple. It does but it helps me step beyond that. Dana, what you were saying is that experience of someone stepped outside of their work setting into a learning setting.
Well, thanks, Jake, for mediating that. So Bob and I are getting.
Oh no, we were never fighting because, again, to hit the dead horse one more time. I've been on a big kick of reminding my team and the people around us, the point of corporate learning is helping people perform in a different way that is going to lead to better business results. It is about performing and adopting behaviors that are going to lead to bigger performance. So now I'm walking away going like, I think I'm going to start calling them performers instead of learners, or maybe we come up with a third word. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. We keep cutting off Jessica because we're so excited about the stuff we're talking about. I think we should give her an opportunity to say something.
No, I was just gonna. I think it's interesting because when we think about the de-siloing, I really like Chris Ernst's work on boundary spanning, and I think a lot of it goes back to that idea of just spanning the boundaries, even just knowing what other people are doing, what they're working on, what technology they're bringing in, what is important to them, what are they seeing amongst the performer learner people, and like what are the challenges coming up, how do we manage that, and how do you do that holistically so that from all sides it looks like a cohesive holistic experience and less like a choppy and I think you feel it as a person working on any side of that, and as the person receiving the
What are the barriers to that? I mean, what are the barriers to getting to that de-siloed ecosystem?
Yeah, Dana, I was kind of going to actually say something very similar to that, but that's a good question. One of the barriers that when we've talked about this so far, up until this point after we released it, there's a lot of individuals feel like they have no power to de-silo in that way. So to your other question, what does this look like in the future? It is there's some organizational things that would have to be done. And that is some type of organizational leader and higher leadership that would need to be doing that. However, one of the first things that Jessica and I have talked about of how do you get to know some of these people that work outside your function, get outside of your bubble a bit. And it's pretty amazing, even when we talk with other functions, how closely aligned they are in their own bubble and unaware of what's happening in L&D, what's happening in HR, your talent attraction, or whatever the case could be. So that to me is one of the first things that you can do, that even though the idea of de-siloing a whole function can seem overwhelming and that's only the leadership's responsibility, but everybody else can start to expand out and learn what other people are doing. Because what I have found fascinating is that we're kind of working on the same problems, all just in different spaces. And when we all start to feel that, or talk the language of development of employees and the progression of employees that leads to performance, we're all on the same mission. It's just that we've organized based off of let's design our formal stuff that's kind of led to us. Let's leave the other things to other functions. So again, that's one of the first things, Dana, that I would say that helps with that larger barrier of feeling like they're helpless to organize.
Yeah.
Differently.
Yeah. I might add also like a perception of time, like how do I do it? Do I have the time to do it? The same way that people, working with a lot of different, when Jake was talking about that, this can be a messy process when you have a lot of different opinions on something. So if I bring in more voices, will this take more time? What kind of pushback might I get? I think sometimes people also just feel safer. It's safe within my environment because of the structure of my organization, or it's safer because I know people, or I'm not clear on the hierarchy rules around reaching out to people. So it's, I think it becomes something that, like, I think most of the things, Jake, I don't know if you'd agree, that we have in the report really can't be just top down, and it also can't be something that the onus can't fall to frontline workers. It has to be, all three of these areas need to be addressed from a broad perspective.
Yep. All right, let me get to the other. Can I get to the other two, and then we can kind of address. So
one quick thing first. So I was just thinking, when I was in the corporate world, there was something I thought of as the barrier of the barrier triad, and it's power, money, and ego. And those three things often are a problem with de-siloing. And I think I'm guessing most of the people who listen to this podcast can relate to that: power, money, ego.
Yeah.
I think so.
All right.
Go back and
okay,
watch
Jake.
Andor
Sorry.
seasons 1 and 2 for a good metaphor.
By the way, my name is Jack. Just to get correct.
Please go ahead, Jack.
So
Don't
the other two that fits under fluid development ecosystem. Again, we have de-siloed people functions. We have create data-driven development ecosystems, and then lastly, make strategic decisions based off of meaningful foresight. So that would hit home, I think, to I know the three of us here, and as well as Jessica, but since Bob, Dana, and myself have come from innovation research for a while. But yeah, when we think of data-driven development ecosystems, I think, one way to de-silo is start to think about the systems underneath that employees don't necessarily know that that part can be super complex, but how do you start to think of the data that that may be owned by L&D, some of the data that may be owned by a people analytics team, maybe owned by your recruiting team, how do you start to see synergies and fluidity amongst that data? That is a very difficult process to move forward in. This is not something that's a quick fix, but something that if we are going to start to use the power of AI to look at that data, to eventually get to what everybody in L&D has always had the holy grail of, and that is more personalized development. If you want to help to personalize the development, again, from the end to end, from that recruiting all the way to the end, you need to think of that data collectively. How can we use that together? So that is one. And then lastly, with the strategic foresight, because of the swirl and the constant change, how do you look more strategically at those signals and things that are occurring around you, not just in your bubble? That's, again, one of the reasons why we do this trends analysis. We're not looking at just an L&D trends. We're looking at all of these signals and trends that are occurring around us to then make a recommendation on how we move forward and what do we constantly need to stay ahead, or at least somewhat ahead. I would say it's very hard to predict the future, but at least feel like you're not catching up all the time. You're making really smart decisions based off the signals that you're seeing. Jessica, anything on that one? Or Bob, Dana, reactions?
No, I was going to say, I feel like we could probably do an episode about every sub-trend. And so if we're not careful, we're going to wind up doing that really quick. So I think you should keep going and drain the whole list, and then we'll see what time we have left.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. I'll go.
Then maybe we'll do a part 2 and let Jessica say something.
I'll just goodbye.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll run through them, and then we'll kind of open them up. That sounds good. So I'll run through the second one quick, and then I'll turn over to Jessica for the last one. So the second one, responsible AI adoption. It's like, again, every report has to have something with AI in there at some capacity. But of those three, we had preserving employee trust to accelerate AI adoption, foster collaboration between humans and AI, and then equipping employees with higher order skills. So I would say in a nutshell, why we are saying responsible AI adoption. We're at this point where many organizations, and I'm sure us on this call can understand that there's experimentations happening all throughout your organizations, and it's great. It's all great. But there was a clear kind of push in the reading that we saw of like, how do we start to move beyond just experimentation into things that actually drive real change and value for your organization. But when the key word in there is responsible adoption. Because now that we're doing all this rapid experimentation, people are questioning, why are we doing this? I don't understand the actual value in doing this. If you're doing something just on efficiency gains, does that mean that I am going to be replaced? So having that lack of transparency starts to reduce the trust in it. There was a really good report on from the Edelman of Trust Barometer. And one of the stats said that 85% of people believe that businesses are obligated to train or reskill employees. So there's a lot of expectations from employees to feel that we are the ones to help them do that. But then when you look at also that same report and they do a trust evaluation across various institutions, businesses still are number one most trusted institutions that they have outside of like government and others. But it's been declining over the last 5 years. So if we are, again, trying to adopt AI and use it in the way that, how do we get the best of it? How do we make it more efficient? It also starts to create a lack of trust because you're unaware of what's truly happening in an organization. Like what is the end game here? So it's to think about when you adopt AI, how do you do it responsibly? How do you look at not just as replacements and automation, but also how do we work together? And then also, what can't it do well? What are the unintended consequences that AI has on cognition and cognitive development and so forth? Because if we, like, again, back to this work, we could have had AI run through all the reports, gave us a readout, but we did it because we knew it was going to make us personally smarter and have a stronger perspective and develop really deep thinking into these areas. And we did that intentionally because, again, if we removed that and offload it to AI, we then lost the benefit of it. So that's kind of the nutshell. I know I'm missing a lot, but Jessica, anything on that one before we jump to the third one real quickly?
No, I just think you hit on it in terms of the efficiency. I think for me, where a lot of the conversation becomes around efficiency and not often on improvement for people, and it's what is the end result there? What is the objective in that? Is it to increase revenue, or is it to increase well-being for people and for society as at whole as at large? I mean, that's sounds very broad, but I mean it is going to disrupt things in a lot of ways. So how do we do that? We also didn't want to ask them, Jake, so the machines wouldn't get mad at us. So,
Tag you for future.
I want to stay. I actively want to stay on their good
Yeah.
side, and
Smart.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I heard that it's wasting a lot of energy, the amount of times people say thank you to AI and GPT systems, but I'm still
And it makes the world a better
staying
place,
strong
is the
with
way I
it.
look at it.
It does.
I think so. I think
All
so.
right.
Yeah, I know, and I'm dying to jump back in on this. I keep thinking about Matt Bean, our conversation with Matt Bean,
Yes.
and the skill code, how it plays into that. But I'm gonna let you finish. Keep going.
That sounds great. So the third area, and we'll do a quick overview of it, just like the others, is resilient and adaptable individuals and organizations. I think one thing that differentiates this is that we saw a big shift towards focus on individuals' resilience during COVID, and then as we came out of that, the heightened part of that period, we moved into sort of organizational resilience, as though those are two separate things. And what we're seeing is that those are not, and they can't exist without each other. So the three areas, just to follow Jake, how you were doing that, Jack, whatever you are today. Yeah, okay. Unlock the potential of a diverse, multi-generational workforce. I'll go into each one in a moment. Support recuperation to ensure sustained performance, and then enable organizational resilience at scale through sustainable workflows. So the first one isn't really a mystery. There was a strong trend regarding multi-generational workforces. And when you're looking at a workforce that now has 18-year-olds all the way through to, people into their
Dana's pointing to himself.
we have 5 generations in the workforce. And so this is leading to the opportunity for really amazing collaboration and learning, but it's also at the moment when it's not handled properly, leading to challenges in the workplace, and even we saw some reports on what was termed incivility, and so that's an opportunity there to really unlock that, and so that's why we use that term. Also, when we're thinking about how the generations are showing up in the workplace, there's a lot of differing views on what professionalism looks like, or what one might expect from a career, what kind of autonomy or flexibility one hopes to have. And you see this reflected in, work from home or return to office mandates and things like that. So that was one area that we looked at. The next was in supporting recuperation. And this comes from work around burnout. And I know that you've discussed this as well on the podcast. And so that's not a surprise to anyone either, but how do we start to address that? And so when we look at what needs to happen, we found that recuperation in a really meaningful way, both in terms of team, from a team level and an individual level, needs to be of paramount importance to managers and to people who are prioritizing, so that they can create a sustainable workflow. And then when we look at the third subtrend, it's enable organizational resilience at scale. And so I think most people are probably familiar with really well-meaning benefits like a gym membership, or maybe an app, like here's a meditation app, and it's all in good spirit, but that puts the onus very squarely on the individual to have to take the time for that, and to say, in between my driving to the office, which I now have to do, and all of the work that we're doing, and all of the change that keeps happening to me, I now need to also set aside time to not just do whatever I want to do, but I have to meditate. Like it's not helping in the way that I think it's intended. And so the way to actually enable that has to come from reimagining what the workplace looks like, what a work environment looks like, and what a workflow entails. And what's exciting, I think, right now when we're talking about the swirl, and Jake mentioned that this was a term we kept using all the time, is that when you're in the middle of the swirl, you have this opportunity to stop and redesign. And so that's why we called this, this concept like redesigning. This is an opportunity to really have an active hand and less a reactionary hand. And so what we're proposing is that leaders take this time to not feel overwhelmed, but to make decisive choices that support the ability of their teams. So happy to get into any of it, but that's sort of the overview. Jake, what I leave out?
No, that's it. I say we jump in because I know I see Bob trying to figure out what he has a couple questions. I know it. I could tell from his face.
Yes, and I'm looking at the clock on the studio wall. Here's what I'm going to propose: is let's do a part 2. Let's get Jessica back on and do a part 2 and do a deep dive on the second 2 trends, because I feel like we wouldn't even do justice diving in right now without going into an hour-long podcast, which we know our listeners don't like. So how does that sound to y'all?
Oh, that sounds good. Yeah.
That sounds great.
I
would love to.
Sounds good. I didn't know that Jack Gittleson had a trust barometer.
I do.
I learned something new today.
No, it's actually not Jack. It's my uncle Carl Edelman, and he's the one that manages that report.
That is so awesome.
Wait, I hope we'll get back to our initial conversation about why we choose movies or TV shows we might not like on planes. So I'm game to come back and do that for sure, as long as I get to hear why you chose something you actively disliked in the theater the first time.
Okay, so with that, we will come to a close on this episode of The Learning Geeks. Jessica, it was super fun to have you on, and great to have a new friend. Even if you work at McKinsey, it's totally cool. I, by the way, am last survivor at Accenture. Jake and Dana, it's always fun. Jack, it was nice to meet you too. I can't believe we were riding this bit to the ground.
I know. That's pretty impressive.
Listeners, thank you most of all for being here. Please make sure that you hit like, hit subscribe, tell all your friends, write reviews on us. Come back next time for Learning Geeks. If you need a Star Wars fix, go to Short for a Stormtrooper, a 50-minute Star Wars podcast. And we will see you on the next episode of The Learning Geeks coming real soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, all.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.